completely healthy. Harvard University had set up a team of doctors to examine how to cure Alzheimer's disease in the United States and Western countries. It's a horrible disease because your memory slowly vanishes and you become no more the person you were. And they brought in the Israeli doctors also to participate in the joint research. And they came to about 3 years ago a conclusion. They found an international comparison showed that India had the lowest incidence of Alzheimer's disease. And that surprised them because India is known for diseases. And how is it that India escaped having Alzheimer's disease as an epidemic? We have other diseases which are in an epidemic form here. So they researched and they came to the conclusion that the only reason the low incidence of Alzheimer's in India is due to the consumption of haldi in our diet. That is turmeric. And this is a conclusion of the most high-powered team set up by Harvard University to look at Alzheimer's. And therefore, in America, they have recommended that every dinner, lunch there should be some haldi in it. And as a consequence, in America today, Indian restaurants are flourishing because of the fact that it is known that we cook our food with haldi. And you will see American customers coming and the waiter asking them what would he like to order. They say curry because that's what everybody knows has haldi in it. And it's become an extremely popular thing. Same thing now with tulsi and so many other herbs which Ayurveda long time ago recognized. So I think today allopathic doctors should keep an open mind on the question of ancient cures of our country and integrate them so that we are able to find cures without relying on the medicines which are prescribed in allopathic medicine which have side effects unlike the medicines prescribed in Ayurveda. I'm not saying that we should give up Ayurveda, not at all. We should keep abreast with that research because some of the cures are quick under allopathic medicine. But nevertheless, there are lots of wisdom embedded in our past literature and our scriptures. Most of all, what our ancient sadhus and sannyasis taught us is that health is a systems concern. You cannot look at health as just one disease, but you have to look at the background and the lifestyle of the person who has brought this disease to you. And therefore today there is need for doctors not to be expert in this memory capacity of what is the latest medicine that has come in the journals, but to look at the lifestyle of the person, whether the fact that he received this disease doesn't come back or other such disease don't come back, to look in terms of the lifestyle he leads and make changes in his lifestyle. Yoga is so popular today that in America there is no city without a yoga center. Today, this is one aspect where yoga has been brought into the main curriculum. And in fact, it has become so popular that some religious Christian leaders in America are concerned that this may lay the foundation for Americans to become Hindus. As a consequence, now they have developed in America something called Christian yoga. Now, I don't know what Christian yoga will be. I have never seen it, but there is that move going also taking place. The other thing that, and it was referred to by my previous speaker just now about the holistic system. You look at the whole picture of the person and try to rectify his lifestyle. I think we should move more and treat medicines as a last resort instead of first resort in our medical system. We have also found that meditation is become a form of cure because the neural energies that are released in the body through meditation. That you can cure yourself through meditation. And certainly, in terms of stress today, it is being widely recognized in the United States and Western countries that the teachings of our great books, of Bhagavan Mahavira, Bhagavan Buddha, and all the wisdom in the Vedas, that in fact if your aspirations are to achieve a goal, without being attached to that goal, without taking victory, success as personal to yourself, but as a goal for achieving, but that the fruits of the action are really determined by God Himself, as Lord Krishna says in the Gita, then stress comes down very sharply. Stress is only when you think that you are responsible for success and failure. If you have tried enough, you will get success. If you didn't try properly, you get failure. This is a wrong assumption. And certainly in India, all our gurus teach us that what ultimately happens is due to the total accumulation of karma, and therefore you should not hold yourself responsible for failure. The only thing you have in life is freedom of action, and you act properly. And in the end, those good actions will accumulate and give you a result in the long run. May not be in a particular situation, but in an overall situation. You may find yourself sometimes trying very hard and getting nothing. You may try sometimes nothing. You may not do anything and may fall in your lap. Maybe your auntie will die and leave you 10 crore rupees, which you will never would have expected. That kind of situation can be best explained in our religion, that the only freedom you really have is freedom of action. But the fruit of that action comes according to what is called in Sanskrit as prarabdha. So I would say this is what we need to do. And I would like to therefore say to you that you will notice in our ashrams in the country that we have so many foreigners coming, rich foreigners, and they are all saying the same thing. We have achieved all the material progress we want, but we have not been able to be happy. And they have come to learn from our sadhus and sannyasis. And they learn here and then they become new persons. We have had Hollywood actresses come here and learn how to become happy. Very famous Hollywood actresses such as Julia Roberts and others who have come here to learn the science of happiness, which our rishis and munis have taught us. So therefore I would say that the part of the medical profession should include this ability. Of course it belongs more in the area of psychology and psychiatry, but still it is part of the medical profession and a certain amount must be given. We have to ask ourselves this question: why is it the most respected sadhus in our country dress so simply as Swamiji here, Param Pujaniya Padma Sagar Maharaj Ji? You will not find in the West a Swamiji dressed like this. The Pope will be always in satin gown with a ruby necklace, diamond necklace, sapphire necklace. His cap will be full of jewels. You'll see the same thing in Makkah. But you'll see in our country that the most venerated people are the least best dressed. This signifies our culture, and that must become part of the thinking in the medical profession. Because I remember when I first went as a student to get my PhD, my classmate, an American, asked me, why you Indians followed Mahatma Gandhi? I asked him, why are you asking me this question? He said, because Mahatma Gandhi was not properly dressed. How can you follow a leader who is not properly dressed? And it was the fact that Mahatma Gandhi just wore a langoti-like cloth, and the whole country followed him, and even the British Empire had to tremble. Can you see any other country in the world where the leader is dressed like Mahatma Gandhi? You will not see. You see America today, Obama he has the best suit and the best tie, and his shoes are always shining. You will not see him dressed like our Mahatma Gandhi or Jai Prakash Narayan or leaders like that. Here lies this distinctiveness of India, and it is that should be built into the psyche. That is why there is a new science developing called the theory of intelligence. And with that, I will conclude what I have to speak by telling you what this new science is, which is not new for the rishis and munis of our country. And that is called the theory of 6 intelligences. The first intelligence is, you know it, it's called cognitive intelligence, where you learn medical science, you learn cause and effect, you learn what hydrogen and oxygen coming together does, what salt and water added together will do, all these chemical reactions, medicines, the effects, what's the effect of antibiotics, all these are part of the cognitive science, which your brain tells you on the basis of observation. But there is also a second intelligence, which is called emotional intelligence, where you learn how to deal with other people, how to argue with other people, that the other person gets to your point of view. This art of teaching, of teaching emotional intelligence, is to make you a person, a part of society, where you can persuade people to join you. And that was our tradition. It was called in Sanskrit the Shastra. You know that when Adi Shankaracharya argued with the Uttamamimamsa school and the Buddhist school of Buddhism, there was no force, there was no use of the talwar, there was no killing, brutality to convert. It was what was called as a Shastra, where you argued and converted. This is unique to India, and that is part of the emotional intelligence. Then you need an intelligence called social intelligence, where you function in a way to advance your career without damaging the social fabric. Today, if we are going to have globalization and the Indian family system is to be destroyed, I don't think you are going to gain very much. I've seen in the West what has happened by the destruction of the family system. In our society, we have so many do's and don'ts, how to behave with your parents, how to treat them. In our country, we gladly look after our parents. In the West, you will not find that. You will not even find the children, at the moment they become adults, caring for what their parents are. They would not even welcome their coming to stay with them for a short while. The relationship between husband and wife, relationship between mother and son, father and daughter, these are all unique to this country. And this is what has made us the longest surviving civilization. There have been 46 civilizations in the world. 45 have died away, like the Egyptian, like the Roman, like the Greek, like the Mesopotamian, the Babylonian, the Zoroastrian, Persia. All these have disappeared. But in our religion, this religion of this country, our culture of this country, the civilization of India, is the only continuing civilization for more than 10,000 years. Why is that? It is because of these interrelationships. We built a society based on social consciousness, and that is what is called social intelligence. Then there is the concept of moral intelligence, which previous speakers have referred to as ethics. Moral intelligence is to do that which is within the morality of the society. And that has been codified in our cultural system by not making money the end of everything. In our country, all the Rajas and Maharajas bow to our sadhus and sannyasis. Why? The Raja never could take a decision on his own. Unlike Europe, the Raja was the decider of war. Raja was the decider of justice. Raja was the final authority. In India, the Raja was never the final authority. He had to consult the rishis and the munis, the religious teachers, and take their advice and act according to it. That is, those who had nothing. Our sadhu, sannyasis, rishis had no wealth, had no land, had no weapons, and yet the mightiest in the country would come and bow before him. That was the system he set up. Money is not an evil. Money is something to be acquired. Prosperity is something to be achieved. But it is not a deciding factor of the social structure of our country. It was way down. If you had lots of money and what you needed you kept and the rest you gave away in philanthropy, then you got social status. Otherwise you did not get social status. The Western countries today, money is everything. If you have money, you get social status. And that is slowly coming to India. The moment money becomes the deciding factor, and no matter which moral method or immoral method you get it, you get social status, then the corruption is inevitable, because then greed comes. Greed comes means corruption comes. And the reason today there is rampant corruption is the growth of greed. And greed because we are slowly becoming a materialistic society, a one-dimensional materialistic society. This is what we have to change, and that we can do by developing moral intelligence. There are other intelligences also, environmental intelligence, innovation intelligence, but the most important intelligence today in the Western world, which is being discussed, which our rishis knew a long time ago, is called spiritual intelligence. Spiritual intelligence doesn't mean knowing mantras. Spiritual intelligence means how to develop your mind to think out of the box, think out of the boundaries. The rishis of long time ago have told us that all the knowledge of the past, future and present is available in the Brahman, which in English is called the cosmos, which is surrounding this world. And if your mind can connect to it, then you will be able to tap into these huge reservoirs of knowledge, and you will become what is called in common parlance as genius. This in modern Western terminology is called the neural Wi-Fi. Like you can run your computer without any wires because there is Wi-Fi. The same way your brain can connect to the cosmos through a Wi-Fi system developed in your brain through meditation, then you will become the most knowledgeable person. Our rishis and munis have done that for centuries. They know what is God, they know what is going to happen in the future, because they are able to connect their mind to the Brahman or the cosmos. These are the types of intelligences which have to be developed in the modern theory of psychiatry, psychology, and is part of your medical science. Doctors are the keepers of the health of our society, and therefore you have a huge responsibility on you, because the society individually trusts you to see them out of danger. I particularly think that this is a very noble profession, and that you have come together today under the blessings of Swamiji here, and you have decided to discuss questions like ethics and so on. This shows that we have a new horizon that is developing in the medical profession, and I congratulate the JIO for having convened such a conference and given me an opportunity. Thank you very much.
Dr. S.B. Jain and Dr. Ajit Bida will felicitate Dr. Subramanian Swami. We thank Shainaji NC for bringing Dr. Subramanian Swami amongst us. Shainaji, thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Dr. Naresh Trehan, and to introduce him, we have Dr. Neeraj Jain from Delhi. Dr. Neeraj Jain is President of Delhi JDF